Praise the Lord, guys. I'm Shaw Greenhorn. And Jesus said, all you shall be offended is not because of me. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd and the sheep shall be scattered. But after that I am risen, I go before you into Galilee. And Simon Peter began to say unto him, Lord, though all men should be offended, yet will I not be. Jesus said, verily I say unto you that this day, even this night, before the cock shall crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. But Simon Peter spake the more vehemently, saying, though I should die with thee, yet will I not betray thee. And likewise the other disciples spoke also. So here Jesus is preparing them for what's coming next. We know that his time is coming. They just made it out to the Mount of Olives. Even though when he says this particular statement, it's not sure if they're still in the place where they were eating, or they were on the way, or they had made it out to the Mount of Olives. It's kind of like one of those in-between places. So the shock of what's coming is really what he's trying to prepare them for. And there's no way that they're going to be able to withstand or stand through it. The pressure that's there in this moment. It's just one of those things. It really is, a life or death thing. We can say things when everything's okay and we're in the calm. But then, when shots start flying and there's danger, who knows what a person will turn into. We even see the Bible says that he should lose none, except the son of perdition, that the scriptures might be fulfilled, because they really did come for him. But if any one of them would have insisted, who knows if they would have been taken also. This was his fight. It wasn't their time. Their time would come when he's taken and they're left, to spread the gospel. So, he leads by example. And that just I always say courage, true courage is always done by the first person. Who was the first person to ever try, jumping out of an airplane with parachute? We didn't know what the impact would be when we made it to the ground. This was done a long time ago. Technology was even less than it is now. Who knows if they would have made it, sufficient enough to bear this body weight? Did they have the wisdom to, test it on an animal or something, just in case it didn't work out? True courage. We have a lot of things in the world that we enjoy right now, and true courage is what brought it out. The civil rights movement, it was led by MLK. And these guys they were at the forefront, and they were the ones facing most of the kickback, but they had to brave it through it. And in true courage, nobody holds your hand. It's really a fight or flight moment. Nobody holds your hand. You have to be determined in your mind. You have to know how to press. Usually God, he gives the vision to a select few, and they are able to carry things out. So this moment is a true courage moment. We know all things being set up, them already conspiring, 2 days before the feast of Passover, where they sought by craft to lay, hands on him. Judas, going out to betray him for money. When they heard it, they were glad. They promised to give him money. This was after, he was anointed with the expensive, box of alabaster ointment of spikenard, very precious, worth 300 pence. I say that Judas, he took this personally. This is what triggered him, to go and make this deal with the chief priests and scribes. So now they're on the lookout, waiting for Judas to come back. We're just at the Last Supper, where we had the communion. He said, verily I say unto you, one of you shall betray me. They all began to be very sad. Is it I, Lord? It is he that dippeth his hand with me in the dish. The Son of Man goeth as it is written of him, but woe unto that man by whom he is betrayed. So now we're in Mark still, and it was not said where he said that thou doest do quickly. It wasn't said that, and the devil entered into Judas Iscariot. You'd have to see that in one of the other gospels. But we understand that that's what's going on at this point. So this is really a softening the blow. This being foretold so that they wouldn't feel too bad, because they're going to take it personally. They're going to say that, well, I wasn't man enough to stand and defend the master. I wasn't man enough to stick it all the way through. We left him, we abandoned him. We fled and he was taken. But if you know the story, you know that Judas, he pulled a sword and he did strike the ear of the servant of the high priest. Jesus preparing them. If you were paying attention along the entire way, he gave them many warnings. Behold, we go up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. They shall condemn him to death and kill him, and he shall rise again the third day. Every time he told them, they began to be so sad. And he told them multiple times, and it's like they never retained it. I always say that even took him and began to rebuke him. This shall not be unto thee. So no matter how much he prepares them for this moment, they're not going to receive it well. They're not going to understand that these things were necessary. They're not going to understand that this was a part of the process. And that just goes to show you that success or something that you're trying to achieve, it might just require you to do something that you think would be hurtful to your ego. It's usually a humbling phase. It's usually you having to step back and hold your peace, hold your tongue, not react, not throwing the towel too early. Because if this was absolutely necessary, we just had the Passover where, in the Old Testament, blood was put on the doorpost and the death angel passed over when they were in Egypt. taking the firstborn of all the Egyptians and all those that did not, the blood on the doorposts. We know that after this, the sacrificial law was given, where the blood of bulls, goats, the high priest going into the Holy of Holies once a year, using the blood to atone, for the sins of the people. So now here is Jesus, the real high priest, offering up his own blood, absolutely necessary. Paul said that if he not be risen, which means that he would have had to be killed, and he was crucified. So if he's not risen, then we are men most miserable, and we are found liars. We preach unto you a false gospel. So taking this into consideration, how necessary was his death? It was very necessary. But yes, so they receive it, so negatively. The path to success, it might require you to, doing things that it might offend you. It might be a blow to your ego. You might, ask why? Why do I have to go through this? Why do I have to do this? When this thing is absolutely necessary. We see people trying to take things into their own hands. People trying to give the meaning of what they think that thing should be. Being able to identify when you're being gassed up, when you're being made to be led astray. About well-meaning people, being able to keep your eyes on the bottom line, keep your eyes, focused on what needs to be done and what needs to be accomplished. All right, so then he began to say unto them, all you shall be offended this night because of me, because it is written, I will smite the shepherd and the sheep shall be scattered. But what is to be offended in him? The Bible says, blessed is he that is not offended in me, applying to everyone afterwards. To be offended, it takes many shapes. To be embarrassed, maybe who you are, at church, maybe that doesn't fly so well or among your peers, your friends. When you go out into the world, you might be ashamed of, portraying these things. We feel this peer pressure in the moment, and we know that, it's a choice to be made. We'll either, stick true to what we know, or we'll just, give in just to fit in, and then we can pick it up back later. To be offended in him means that you were walking with him at some point, but then, there was a separation. There was a separation, and you didn't just only go your way, but you went your way with a certain feeling. If it's strong enough, it might even be considered a prejudice. When we think of the word offense, what comes to mind is, a strong reaction, where we're outraged. Outrage usually comes to mind, where we might even get physical. We have a strong, aversion, to say, no, this is outside of what I believe. This is outside of who I am. So all you this night shall be offended because of me. Because it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered. So all you shall be offended in me this night. Offense, it has so many meanings, in this context. But for them, if I would be able to speak on their behalf, I would say that their offense was more fear for their, lives, fear of the unknown. And just being, just a regular human being. It was a sight when they came for him. The soldiers, swords and staves, you want to compare that to like a witch burning. In the old days when somebody was accused of witchcraft, and the whole town would get together with pitchforks and shovels, and they would light a bonfire. So when he said, you be offended in me, offended because of me, it's because of me, it's because of who I am, it's because of what I stand for. I'm the reason. He didn't say it in Mark here, but I go away, and the prince of this world cometh, and he had nothing in me. And this was a long time in the making. These leaders, these chief priests, elders and scribes, Pharisees, they hardened their heart. Every corner they turn, they hardened their heart more. And they just set themselves up for failure. And this is what we're seeing. It's just a culmination, of these things. So, you being offended in this case, it's being fearful. It's, to take offense, it means that you're not, your usual self. The experience that you're going through, is more in reaction to whatever is going on. We know that they were on the run, they were hiding when he was taken. They weren't just their regular selves. You see stuff like this, when a person goes through trauma, like something bad will happen where, they're still there. They might be at home, they might be at work, but there's a drastic change in their baseline, emotions, their feelings, their mind, is consumed or preoccupied with this, experiencing trauma, is experiencing stress, them being offended in me. Offense even causes you to look, take a double look at whatever it is. I can't believe I was believing this thing the whole time. Was I a fool, for believing this? This offense, like, him being taken and them not able to do anything about it. And also the fact that he was taken, just the very fact that he was taken, them knowing that he was the Messiah, King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, the Son of God. If you were the Son of God, then how could you be taken like this? I think that was really a great source of all of their, offense. It's just the simple fact that he was taken. Because people in stress, they are forced, when they look at the thing that happened, to redefine their life. I've seen it, they redefine their life as if this thing was true from the very beginning. A really bad example I could use, somebody gets, as a young, child gets sexually molested. You often see them go on to live promiscuous lifestyles. And, what happened? What's happening here? It's because you see the trauma, it causes them to look at life as if that was always the case. So using this example, if they got sexually molested, then hey, I'm not as special. I'm not daddy's little girl or, daddy's little boy. Maybe I was always sexually advanced. And maybe I was always doing these things, because it's such a blow to them. And it's easier because, the mind, it searches for meaning. And it's easier to hold one meaning than two in this case. That, I was a good child and I just got molested. These are two things, two separate things. I was a good child and I also got molested. But no, they're going to say that, well, I was always like this. I always welcome things like this. And they would change their future to welcome things like this. And that's why, things like that happens. So no, them being offended. So no, they're forced to come back and, like I said, rationalize that this was always the case. They're going to rationalize that, well, he was always taken. That means he was always powerless. He was always hated. He was always an offender. They always, were seeking to destroy him. Maybe the things that he does, maybe the miracles that he did, maybe they didn't even exist really. It's amazing what the mind can dump when faced with trauma like this. Because I can guarantee you, they were walking around like they were with the Jesus that, brought Lazarus back from the dead, that brought, Jairus' daughter back from the dead, that the woman with the issue of blood, she touched the hem of his garment. All these things, they were thrown out the window. It's amazing what the human mind can do when trauma like this faces it. So now, these men, they're walking around as, they might as well have been walking around with Barabbas. That's what they're feeling right now. He's just as guilty as Barabbas was. He's just as, good as Barabbas was. He's just as, the miracles that Barabbas was able to do, which was nothing, he was just as able as Barabbas to do miracles. This offense, it cut so deep and it went so, thorough. He told them so many times, I'm about to be taken. I'm about to be taken. I'm about to be taken. All they would ever do is get sad and throw their hands up in despair. They were never ever, they failed to make the connection that this was necessary. That this was a part of the plan. Interjecting what they believe and how they think, things should go and what they mean. It's good to master human psychology. It's good to master even how you think. There's a great saying a philosopher said. He said, know thyself. Know what keeps you going. Know what motivates you. Know what are your triggers. Know what things can shut you down. Know what things are roadblocks in you. What might be a roadblock for one is not going to be a roadblock for the other. We have different minds. We have different tendencies. We were raised differently. We were taught differently. We learned differently. We collected different values growing up, different experiences. What might be like water might be a strength for one, where it's a weakness for the other. One might be able to swim across the canal, while the other, he drowned, right there and there as he went in. Stepping stones will be different for other people. So all you shall be offended this night because of me. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered. So now him smiting the shepherd, them taking him and him losing his power. So now the sheep are looking around. Well, if our shepherd couldn't protect himself, what are we to do? Sometimes, I've seen it where, capable people, when one, person starts, panicking, or in this case, they get shut down, then they challenge everything that they ever believed about themselves. When Goliath was defying the army of Israel, 40 days they hid from Goliath. How did David, how did David, defeat Goliath? It was with the slingshot. This is not my original revelation. I heard it from somebody, but if you will read before they got there, when they were describing the men that were with Saul, they all could sling stones at a hair breadth and not miss. That means they were all experts with the slingshot. This is not my original. It's there, but yet still the very thing that was supposed to be their strength, they were afraid. Having the tools but not knowing, being so overtaken with fear. So smiting the shepherd, because they were, being raised to be shepherds. They were the 12 apostles. They were the disciples first when he sent them out 2 by 2. That's when it started first referring to them as the apostles. It was when they came back from, this 2 by 2. So they were, being groomed to be shepherds themselves. Anywhere he would take, them. He would speak the parables, to the multitude, and then afterwards, break things down for them. But now, here he is about to be taken. The sheep shall be scattered. So now then one can ask the question, them being in this mind frame, in this despair. What would have happened if, Jesus didn't come back and speak to them? Because, they weren't given their instructions. Would they just have, hanged everything up? Fishermen going back to fishing, tax collector going back to, the sitting at the receipt of customs. It's the fight or flight, defense mechanism kicking in. Because, if they can overcome, Jesus, who we were under his care. We were under his care. He fed us. He taught us. And it was him performing all these miracles. And if they could do that to him, what hope do we have? No matter how much he would tell them, I'm about to be taken, I'm about to go, they still saw him coming as King of Kings, Lord of Lords, occupying earth, taking over. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered. Who's making this in a prophecy? I will smite the shepherd. Whose words are these? Now you might think that I know the answer to that, but I can only theoretize. I haven't paid that much careful attention. But, is this the enemy? Is this the devil speaking? That I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock shall be scattered. Is this his own saying, the Father, that I will smite the shepherd and the sheep shall be scattered? I'm asking the question, but I don't know the answer. All right, so the next one says, but after that I am risen again, I go before you into Galilee. So here he's telling them again, after that I am risen. For me to be risen, I have to die, right? How many times do I have to tell you that I'm about to die? And you guys cannot receive it. Maybe I'm focusing too much on the death part. So let me tell you what comes after. I go into Galilee. Because, they say that great minds, they come to the community meeting board. They come to the corporation board meeting, with problems, with solutions. Don't just come with problems. Come with problems, with solutions. And then we can work it out. We can combine solutions. We can take some from this one, mix it with some from this. We can take these two and leave that one. We can mix and match. Because so far I've just been telling you that I die and then I'm risen. But, because, if you remember when he was risen, the angels, they told him that he goes before you into Galilee, just as he said, right? What I'm seeing here for myself is, all right, so what can we learn from this about giving, detailed instructions, being a leader? All right, so we're going into Galilee. Where in Galilee we're going to see you? What are we going to do when we get there? How do we pick up? What are some things we should be looking for? What are some things we should be expecting? How long? Giving as much, clear instructions. Because sometimes, you know the plan, and because you already know the plan, that you assume, it's a projection. Perception is projection. So you project this onto others, thinking that the way that you described it, that they receive it just as well as you knowing. But then it can be said that God, he doesn't always give all the things, but he wants you to trust him. And he wants to lead you step by step, every step of the way. But after that, I am risen, I go before you into Galilee. So I'm showing you the plan that I'm coming back. Not only I'm coming back, I'm going to see you in Galilee. I know we haven't gotten there yet, but when he's killed, and they're so depressed when they saw him and he was walking, he even said, what manner of conversation is this that you have one to another, that you walk and are sad? And they began to explain in despair, oh, we had Jesus and he was taken and they killed him. Emotion overriding reason when reason should be overriding emotion. Emotion overriding reason when reason should be overriding emotion. Because I gave you all these things, all the pieces are there. And I gave you them more than one time. But yesterday, the only thing that you could stick to was the emotion. The fact that, he was taken and killed. And now you're questioning everything that you ever were told, everything you ever were taught, everything that you ever believed. Simon Peter said, Lord, though all men should be offended in you, yet will I not be. So, Simon Peter, he's the bold one. He's the brave one. He's the leader. I believe he was the oldest. But that's not always the case. The boldest one is not necessarily always the oldest. Depending on family dynamics, it could fall anywhere from the oldest to the middle child to the youngest, depending on how the parents, parenting style were and how they see the world. The oldest might be because he was put in charge, always in charge. The youngest might be because they were always the baby. They were always babied and, pampered. For whatever reason, they might love another child because they share the same interests, Simon Peter, he steps up to the plate and, he's trying to show his loyalty. He's trying to show his, reserve, that he is, different from the rest. This is just a continuation of when he asked to walk on the water. Just as when he saw Jesus walking, he said, hey, Lord, if it be thou, bid me to come. Jesus knew he had his best bet, when he said, thou art, Simon Bar-Jonah, and upon this rock I build my church. Because, he was always the one that's going to act first. He was always going to be the one to have to not get just, paralyzed. So at least do something. If he was going to even do the wrong thing, at least do something. As you can see when he cuts off the servant of the high priest's ear. So in this moment, Just like when he took Jesus and he said, this shall not happen unto you. And Jesus had to rebuke him, get thee hence Satan, thou savorest not the things that be of God, but the things that be of men. Though all men should be offended in thee, yet will I not be. Because I can see, more than they can. I'm always committed. I'm down for anything. But then again, in this moment, he's assuming that it's going to be a familiar emotion that's going on. He's assuming that the calmness, is going to be the same. That the frame, is going to mean the same thing. Security is going to be the same. He's assuming just familiarity. And I say that that's the reason why, if you notice athletes, when they, practice, it's very different than when they play the game. When you're at practice and you're just shooting around, even playing scrimmage, it's a different atmosphere than when you it's the whistle. I say it's the whistle that does it, and the referee. If you notice players, practicing, they'll make way more shots. They'll feel more comfortable, dribbling. If it's basketball, driving to the rim, being more secure in their layups, in their dunking, being more secure in their passing. But then, you introduce the crowd. It's scrutiny. Scrutiny is what I say, scrutiny. So now there are eyes watching you. There's eyes watching this pass. There's eyes watching this dribbling. There's eyes watching this shot and this dunk. There's eyes and there's a whistle. And there's so much pressure on you, because if you mess up, then people are going to talk. So the emotion is different. The frame is different. So in this moment, Simon Peter, he's assuming the same frame. Scrimmage, you call your own fouls, right? Though all men should be offended in thee, yet will I not be. Living in the safety, living the emotion of the current safety. The preparation of emergency workers, whether they be firemen or police, ambulance. Part of that training is actually emergency. Because we can tell you everything that we need to do. But then in the emergency, all of Saul's men, they forgot they knew how to sling stones. But then you can argue and say, well, did not God hide that from them so that David could come and take his rightful place? Jesus said, verily I say unto you, that this day, even in this night, before the cock crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. So Jesus here, he is presenting, the scenario. He's not presenting the emotion. He's not going to say, well, you're going to be looking to run or to fight. That your heart is going to be in your chest. Your eyes are going to be scurrying so fast over the place. Your ears are going to be so sharpened that even the slightest noise, you would turn your head and hear it. You would look right towards wherever it came from. But he's describing, the final outcome of it. As a matter of fact, from where you stand right now, you're going to say you don't even know me. As much as you're saying right now that, you will be there. You won't run away. You won't be afraid. It's going to be so bad. It's going to be so heavy on you. It's going to be so heavy that you're going to deny even knowing me. You don't even know me. I don't know this guy. How could there be such a drastic change? How could the people go from, when he rode in on the donkey, Hosanna in the highest, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. Was this not the Jesus who, when he tried to hide when he got inside the house, and somebody saw him. Now the whole town gathered there. They had to let the guy in through the roof that was lying in the bed sick of the palsy. When he was after he healed the woman with the issue of blood by the touching of the hem of the garment, the next city he went to, they just laid everybody out in the streets. And as he walked by, they each touched the hem of his garment. How do we go from having such faith, such believing, looking at him like this, just lay everybody out. As he walks by, just touch his garment. How do we go from that, to crucify this man? How do we go from Peter saying, though all should be offended in thee, yet will I not be? Well, we know for the Hosanna in the highest, to crucify this man. At the Last Supper, it was said that the devil then entered into Judas, but it does not say that he also entered into the whole atmosphere, because he is the prince of the power of the air. So now he was occupying that whole space. And that's why everything was so coordinated, not just among the high priests, but amongst the people. Because the high priests and the chief priests and the elders and the scribes, they hated them, and that's no news. But them hating him, it did not have any effect on the people so far. How could we go from revering him so much to just hating him? Because the prince of the power of the air, he entered the air. If you notice, everything, it was coordinated as if it was just being done by one person, which it was. But then the difference now for Peter saying, thou all should offend thee, and then saying, I know thee not. It's the frame, it's the situation, seeing your life right before you. Because Peter, he put his best foot forward. He's a slinger, right? He put his sword and he wanted to strike first, and he did. If you had allowed him, he probably would have just struck everyone down first. But you take that from him, and it's the only thing he knew. How do you fight when the only thing that you consider an advantage is taken, and you have to rely on something else? The sword was taken from Peter, and now it's just left him, standing before them. So then now we face a choice. Before the cock crow twice, thou shalt deny me thrice. If you remember, when Jesus said, Simon Peter, Satan has desired thee that he might sift thee as wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith fail not. Here was his moment. That's why he got him to deny him 3 times. The Bible says that let every word be established in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses. In the Old Testament, it was said that no man should be put to death by the testimony of 1 person. It's got to be 2 or 3. So then now, him getting Peter to deny Jesus 3 times. So then now we're coming to sift him as wheat. And that's the connection. Simon Peter, Satan has desired you to sift you as wheat. Here is where he comes in, getting him to deny him 3 times. And that's where we start. So then he was supposed to come and pull him away from Jesus. Having to be very careful, because if you pull too fast, then he might just latch on back out of a knee-jerk reflex. But get him to stand back for a while, get him to just have confusing feelings and let him sit in that for a while, and slowly bring in doubt, and then amplify that doubt to hate, to unbelief. And that's the process of how, he pulls believers, out of the body of Christ, right? It's the same thing. So he said, verily I say unto you, and I always say that's the closest Jesus ever came to swearing. Anytime he says, verily I say unto you, it's such an emotionally charged moment for him. Because here we have Simon Peter, professing his loyalty. And according to what he knew, he did follow through. Did he not follow through? According to what he knew. As soon as it came for him, he grabbed that sword and he started swinging. But then, like I said, what do you do when the only thing that you know is taken from you and you're forced to fight another way? This way you're not used to. You haven't built up strength in it. You haven't built up courage. You haven't built up experience. You haven't built up faith. It's brand new. This was a good learning lesson for Peter, because, let's get rid of this habit right now. Right? What if it wasn't, brought to the surface and Jesus went back and then he decided to pull the sword? Who would be there to rebuke him? But then Simon Peter answered vehemently, saying, though I should die with thee, yet will I not deny thee. And the other disciples spoke likewise. So now they're getting, the courage to speak up. They missed their turn and walking in the water, and now here they're trying to make up for it. Yes, we will also die with you. So though I should die with thee, easier said than done, right? Like I said, easier said when we look around and there's nothing but peace. There's calm. It's only us. There's no third party looking. There's no spectators. There's no pressure. There's no heat of the moment. We're all in the safety of each other's company. The referee and the whistle is not there. The crowd is not cheering. It's not the season on the line with the last 10 seconds to go. I am Straw Greenhorn.